So I'm going to show you how I draw a portrait. This isn't really an instructional video, more of a demonstration of my own process, insofar as I have a process. Instructions kind of implies there's one right way to do it, and there isn't really. I don't know if anyone ever got those step-by-step how to draw books, but I was just used to ignore all of the instructions and copy the end part anyway. Everyone's process is different. These are just things I've picked up or figured out over time by drawing about 100 different portraits. So I've got my reference in front of me. I'm working from that. I'm going to start with a just sort of basic structure for the head. Just plot out where everything goes. Otherwise you get muddled up, or I do. Central line, and there, an eye line. Oops. Comes on here a bit more. The eyes always in the center of the head, so I can sort of plot out at least a roundabout where everything goes. And I'm sort of measuring where everything is in reference to my other lines there. That's about nose. There. And then put mouth. Lots of rubbing out initially. So you can get things a bit better plotted for later on, because it's much easier to rub out at this stage than it is once you've been working on it for hours. So you've got doesn't have to be terribly accurate. Just so you have an understanding. You start at the bottom of the nose. Right, so that's sort of very, very basic shapes down, and now we're going to do more of sort of shapes around in the face. I think a lot of learning to draw is more sort of learning to see than any technical skill. You can learn to look at things in certain ways. I think it's funny that, I think especially with faces, you think you know what's there, and it makes it an awful lot harder to see what actually is there. Draw what you can see, not what you think you should be able to see. Especially if you're drawing from life, that becomes quite
quite a difficult way of thinking about things, and you always have to sort of forget that you know what a face is so that you can see it properly. Just see everything. I think it's just shadows and shapes, really. Just blocking in a few shadows. I do find it a bit difficult sometimes, but trying not to get too bogged down in the details initially usually helps. And the space between the eyes should be the same as the length of an eye. That helps with getting them in the right places. Otherwise, you always end up with one looking really just slightly off. So mouths and nose quite difficult shapes to reproduce. That's one of those things where you think it should look like one thing, but as soon as you try to draw any hard lines, it looks really odd. The mouth, from the pupil down, that should be the corner of the mouth goes. In the corner of your eye, you need the edge of your nose. It's centerline. Keep everything in the right place once you've started changing things and working into places. Stab myself with my pencil. It's good to take a step back at points like this so you can view it a little bit more holistically. Very easy to get a bit drained in details, trapped in the details. It makes it harder to see what you're actually looking at. There's another little sort of trick with seeing these things. So when something doesn't quite look right, but you can't really tell why, you can sort of trick your brain by turning the paper upside down and looking at it that way, because it's much easier to see the proportions. You can sort of trick your brain into thinking that you're not actually looking at a face. Makes it easier to see it. It sounds kind of ridiculous, but human brains kind of are. You can see where things line up much more easily. I think I'm happy with that for now. I'm going to start blocking in some of the shadows. You didn't have to do it very heavily. You just lightly go over things, and you'll start to see it coming together a bit more with the shadows. Blend everything a little bit in, just with my finger. And you can see things starts to look a little bit more three-dimensional. I think this is the point in the process where I take a break and have a cup of tea. It's a very important part of the process.